compounding essentially means it's slow in the beginning, and suddenly what took you 7 years is only taking you 1 year. So that's the essence of it. Simple portfolios were beating the complex. So we had a very large, like 100, 200 crore kind of portfolios where we used to do a lot of these. We buy stocks, we buy bonds, we do asset allocation, we do so many complex stuff. And it took a lot of my time, my team's time, and like we were putting in so much of effort. And on one end, we had a very simple solution where we just put it and we kind of, it's called life planning solution, where essentially it will automatically rebalance itself. It was a mix of balance advantage funds. But the broad idea was that you don't need to do much, you let it run. And if there are some fund changes you might have to do. But the broad idea was keep it simple, and these portfolios were almost doing equivalently, or in most cases were outperforming. Simple portfolios were beating the complex. So we had a very large, like 100, 200 crore kind of portfolios where we used to do a lot of these. We buy stocks, we buy bonds, we do asset allocation, we do so many complex stuff. And it took a lot of my time, my team's time, and like we were putting in so much of effort. And on one end, we had a very simple solution where we just put it and we kind of, it's called life planning solution, where essentially it will automatically rebalance itself. It was a mix of balance advantage funds. But the broad idea was that you don't need to do much, you let it run. And if there are some fund changes you might have to do. But the broad idea was keep it simple, and these portfolios are almost doing equivalently, or in most cases were outperformed. I try to identify good fund managers who have underperformed for 3, 5, 7 years, and they have a very low churn. Because imagine the amount of pressure that fund manager would be going through for that 3, 4, 5 years. And despite that, if that particular fund manager is not changing the portfolio, it means it shows conviction.
Today I'm speaking to Arun Kumar, who is Head of Research at FundsIndia and is also known as the 80-20 investor. Arun, what is the story behind the name?
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil, for having me on the show. So the name is derived from the principle of 80-20 principle, which is also known as the Pareto's law. Effectively, it says that to get 80% of results in most areas in life, you don't need to put in 80% of efforts. While logically it looks like something is wrong, the rule says that you only need to put 20% of efforts. Now, if you really think through it, like let's take your wardrobe. Most likely, while you have probably hundreds of them, mostly you end up you use few of your shirts or pants. Same thing, let's take Live Mint newspaper itself. You will find that few sections probably have maximum number of people visiting. So you can find that law almost getting applied in sales, in most areas in life it applies. Then the thought was, will it also apply to investing? And once you study all the big investors, you kind of figure out that there are these few big bets that they took, or few activities out of those 100 activities that really matter. So the essence idea was, can we figure that out and get really good at those few activities so that without putting too much of effort, I'm almost able to become an 80% good investor. And obviously from 80 to 100 probably might require insane amount of effort, but 80% is a good enough outcome for most of us. So can I figure that out and pass it on to the outside world? So which is why I started this blog called 80-20 investor, and somehow the name stuck on.
So what were those 3 or 4 things that got you 80% of the way?
Yeah, so broadly there are some 4-5 items which I would say. The first broad rule is to get a hang of this whole thing called compounding, because almost you find every investor talking about this, but somehow the real problem it's intuitively hard for the mind to process it. So the way I kind of tell myself or try to understand this is that you take a simple example where, say, if you're able to put rupees 30,000 month on month, and then you're able to compound at 12% interest. Now, for a second, let's not worry about whether you get 12. This is just pure math. 30,000 every month at 12%. It takes you almost, and then let's assume you are growing it by 10%, because most of our salaries will also grow at 10%. So it takes you, to hit the first 50 lakhs, it takes you 7 years. And then the next 15 lakhs doesn't take you another 7 years, it takes you only 3 years. Then the next 50 comes in 2 years. And after that is 1.5. After that is again 1.5. So by the time you hit your 15th year, almost every year you end up adding the same 50 lakhs. So what took you 7 years will essentially take you 1 year. So the way to start thinking more is very non-intuitive. The way to broadly think about it is that what takes a long time in the initial phases, over a period of time, compounding essentially means it's slow in the beginning, and suddenly what took you 7 years is only taking you 1 year. So that's the essence of it. Now again, you might say, somebody might say, I can't put 30,000. Somebody might say 30 is too low. And all our career paths are not 30,000 into 10% every year. It suddenly have high. So first level is figure this savings part of it, because real life is a lot more messy. So first level is how do I think through a mental model of the savings part, which is completely under my control. Second thing is there is no asset class which will 100% guarantee give you 12% or 12 to 15%. Your FDs give you say 5-6% post-tax. So then what are the challenges in figuring out this asset? And then the third part is how do I do it consistently over 10-15 years, and then the engine starts or the compounding effect starts. So effectively this whole idea of these small, it's about figuring out these three pieces. Now, so while I'm not going into all three, so maybe if you just take the savings as a mental model, there's this famous example which is given by an investor whose name I kind of, it's off my mind, but the idea is from 10 lakhs, how do you go to 100 crores? He says if you can compound at 25%, every 10 years you almost do 10x. So by the time you are at 30 years, you will be at,
I think Ramesh Damani,
perfect, yeah. So the key idea is, but 25% is too hard, right? So the way I start thinking about it is that every year you get some returns from your portfolio. Say you are able to make 10, 12, 15%. Now the remaining 10, 12, 15% is the gap. But anyway, you are also saving. So the moment you start shifting your saving as X amount, instead of that, if you can see as what is the savings as a percentage of my portfolio. So if I have 10 lakhs and if I am able to add 1.5 lakhs on the entire year, so I have personally added 15%. And on top of it, if my portfolio also gives me some sort of a 10-15%, so suddenly I am ending up growing my portfolio at 15%, or sorry, at 25-30%. And this, if you can do it over a long period of time, suddenly now this becomes a lot more doable. So the first mental model is start looking at your savings as a percentage of your entire portfolio. So when you are initially beginning, your portfolio is too small, and it's actually your savings which is almost adding 50%, 100%. And at that level, you start figuring out which is the best investment and you start wasting your time. So the 80-20 rule again says that don't worry about this. Just keep it really simple. But the real meat of the problem is your savings. And if you can increase your salary and increase your savings, this will give you the maximum muscle. So till a point in time, you will find that the savings that you can do as a percentage of your matter much more. So this was the 80-20 idea. And then then you know what to focus more. But at some level, once your portfolio grows big, then you will find that the savings becomes far smaller. Maybe it's only 5%. Then you are then every incremental optimization that you can do on your portfolio kind of adds to it. So this is one way in which you start thinking through the savings. And similarly, you can do it for the portfolio and for how to build it through time.
So if you think back to your own journey, when did you start investing?
So I started in 2008. So I had joined an IT company, TCS. So I was there as a part of their training program. As luck would have it, one of my colleagues at my TCS training program was a son of a very famous Tamil author who was writing about stock markets. And the irony is that he was the only guy who was writing, and that was a solid book. Like if you personally ask me, it's a book called Allah Allah Panam, and it's like a 3-4 series. So he was a son of that particular author. So he gave a session to us on this whole investing, and I was floored because it basically after that it looked like you need to put very little effort, and then again the numbers, right? After 10 years you get so much. This is what. And you are like, so I'm like, okay, probably this is a way out of, I don't need to work much, but initially you obviously assume that it's all super easy, but then he introduced me to his father's books. So that's how it started, very, very accidental. But then I kind of got hooked onto it. Then I did my MBA and joined a wealth management firm called Wealth Advisors India, based out of Chennai. And then from there on, it's been fully through this industry.
Yeah. So actually, it's been 16 years for you. So you would have seen this effect happen in your own portfolio.
Yes. So as you rightly mentioned, the effect I started seeing the real effect only in the last 5 years. So initially, most of it I would use to save, and my first 5 years was mostly about making a lot of mistakes. I used to spend a lot of time on stocks. So initially my mental model was you need to become a great stock picker to make a lot of wealth. So we used to do a lot of stuff, small, because anyway the amount is too small that even if you get a great stock pick, and then you realize it takes immense amount of time and effort, because for every stock you will need to analyze the sector, and then within that there is a lot of news flow. And if I have to build a portfolio of 10-20 stocks, then at least I need to have 100 to 200 stocks which I would have had to analyze. And over a point in time, I kind of came to the realization that hey, this is too hard. Like this is too hard. And the first realization came when my ELSS beat me hands down. So ELSS, like you when you did it for the first time, you were like, why would you put it in a mutual fund? Stocks are far better, but you do it for the tax. And after 3-4 years, I realized that it's giving me almost with 0% effort from my side. It's giving me fantastic returns. And then post that and then I also started seeing one pattern across while we were advising a lot of clients. We found that simple portfolios were beating the complex. So we had a very large, like 100-200 crore kind of portfolios where we used to do a lot of these. We buy stocks, we buy bonds, we do asset allocation, we do so many complex stuff. And it took a lot of my time, my team's time, and like we were putting in so much of effort. And on one end, we had a very simple solution where we just put it and we it's called life planning solution, where essentially it will automatically rebalance itself. It was a mix of balance advantage funds. But the broad idea was that you don't need to do much, you let it run. And if there are some fund changes you might have to do. But the broad idea was keep it simple, and these portfolios are almost doing equivalently, or in most cases were outperformed. So by the time I was in 15, 16, I kind of came to this realization that maybe you can keep it really simple and still deliver phenomenal outperformance.
This is very interesting because a lot of HNIs think and their advisors think that when you have a 100 crore portfolio, you should be doing fancy stuff, AIFs, PMS, some kind of structured product here. But that's not actually the case.
At least personally and then the hardest part is to prove it to the world, right? Because now I can say that, hey, simple beats complex. But now where is the proof? Because at that point in time, it was just a thought. And because the whole world was moving in a different direction, so does this work? So what I did was, so by the time by 15, 16, 17, this thought had kind of gained credence and I had read a lot, and more or less I put the things in place. Then I said, unless and until we show the results, it's very difficult to convince people. So then I started my SIP. And I said, I'll start with 30,000. Every year I will increase it by 10,000 and we'll keep running it. And there'll only be 2 funds. Most likely I won't change it. So I picked one fund called iPro India Opportunities. Basically, I wanted to play on Shankar and Naren, who is a very, he has 15, 20 years experience. So my sense is if I can get him at a lower cost, why break my head? So pick him, and then I picked Pareto Principle. So I think iPro I changed once because Naren was managing. I put it in large and mid cap. Then I moved to iPro India. But essentially the idea was pick the fund manager, then just 2 funds. And then till date I have not changed anything. But now if you look at the results, it's almost at 75 lakhs is the portfolio. My returns are close to 28%. And so CAGR is 28. So 28 is an abnormally high number you attribute to the bull market. This was in 2018. So this is 5.5 years. So I used to do a review every 6 months, and the review is fairly simple. So you can go to my blog 8020investor.com and you can see the entire journey. When you started, what was the return? After 6 months, the returns were bad. And then like I think iPro India Opportunity were doing really badly, even at 2 years. Then it's okay, but the idea was you keep it simple. So I did not do anything, 0 effort. Every 6 months I would do a review. And then so that this was first level of validation for me, because till you cross 5 years, you're also not sure whether you've got lucky or...
So you didn't change the funds, you didn't hop in and out of them, you just kept them
doing. And it's there recorded. Every 6 months you can see and you can see the returns go zigzag. So I'm saying 28 is far more than my expectation. If it was 12, 15, it is okay. But I'm just saying the effort it requires is almost zilch, but because I kept it simple. Then at FundsIndia, we have a concept called how do we build portfolios, right? So one of the biggest challenges that I was facing is that all these funds go through one cycle where they do extremely well. And then you pick up those funds. And then in the next cycle, they end up doing badly. And this was kind of repeating again and again. So mostly if you look at all fund selection that is on, you do the metrics and all that, eventually it kind of boils down to a sorting of highest to lowest. And if you map the ratings and whatever rating you do, the last 5 years get the disproportional impact on the results. So then I said, how in the world can I build together a portfolio where I am not getting caught with the current performers, and there is also the next level of outperformance most likely will come from somebody who's underperformed. But what is the framework to put around it? So then we understood something called the factor investing or the style-based investing, where we found out that there is different styles which can work. Just like an Indian cricket team, there is a fast bowler, there is a medium pacer, there is a spinner, but you have no idea who is going to do well on that particular match. So the idea was, can we figure out 4 or 5 styles, put them together, and all these styles are very different to each other, and pick out 2 or 3 guys who are really good at doing those styles, and pick one and then put a just 5 fund portfolio. So we started this in 2020, probably the worst ever time to start, because the day I started, in 2 months it was down 40%. The idea was
crash happened.
So there was a value fund, there was a quality fund, there was a growth or a blended kind of a fund, there was a mid and small cap fund, and there was a global fund. Now we have also added, instead of global, we've also given a choice of momentum, because at that point in time we did not have momentum as a style in India. But the key point is that every year when we started, quality was doing extremely well. So everybody said, all this is fine, can we remove the value alone? And can we knock off the mid alone? Because mid caps was doing really bad, because in 18 it started, and then 18-19 was a very bad phase for mid and small cap. So they said, I don't want mid but
they were looking at the backward.
Correct, because quality was doing really well. Anybody, and you look at PMS, you look, all quality guys were shooting it off the roof. But as luck would have it, in the next 3 years the cycle turned. So quality became so currently quality is the worst performing fund in mine. If I had not added quality, my performance would have been even higher. So now I have 2 funds which are the most underperforming funds, and the other 3 have delivered well. Now overall the question is, now we've done it for almost 4.5 years.
Quality and growth are underperforming, and the other...
Correct. The other 3 are doing well, and every year, say 1 year global did not do well, but something else, mid caps did. So something or the other kept. So the overall realization for us was, at the end of it, after 4.5 years, when we measure it every year, it is almost 22% in CAGR. Vis-a-vis 17 for the Nifty 50. So you did not make a single move. The only move that we made came this month, because the person who was handling quality cycle is now slightly diluting the portfolio. So the key thing is, we have changed from this underperforming fund to another quality fund which is underperforming even worse than this. So this is a very weird change that we have done. Like, you move from one underperforming fund to, because all we want is somebody who can stick to that style from which we don't mind, because I have the other 4 styles which have rescued me, because at the end of the day you are looking at the aggregate. So this whole idea of simple beats complex now has proof. Now I can also show to people that this is what works. So I think it will take some more time, but as we build some more proof, right, as time progresses, then I'll be even more confident. But the simple thing is that you don't need to do too many stuff. Once you get the construct or the design right, then the idea is you let it run for a very, very long period of time, and you might change. But in this case, we were forced to change, because the fund was getting, the original team had left. They are slowly showing signs of dilution. That we don't want. So we are like, you stick to the process, we will stick to you, but the performance will come, because at the next cycle, this portfolio will anyway have quality also. So this is how this whole simple versus complex has kind of played out in real life with real life returns.
Yeah. So in your own portfolio, do you have the same funds?
Yeah, in my own portfolio, I do a slightly more aggressive version of it, where I purely go for, my pattern is, I try to identify good fund managers who have underperformed for 3, 5, 7 years, and they have a very low churn. Because imagine the amount of pressure that fund manager would be going through for that 3, 4, 5 years. And despite that, if that particular fund manager is not changing the portfolio, it means it shows conviction, and on top of it, they expect the next 3, 4, 5 years to overcompensate for the underperformance. So if I can figure out these kind of funds and put them together, even if I make a mistake on 1 or 2, I will still end up making a lot more money. So the first funds which I, at least on a personal portfolio, because see, this you can't sell it as a concept because it's very hard. Right? Tomorrow if I come to you and say, Neil, these are the 4 funds and these are all underperforming, and even if I convince you, let's say after 6 months, then you are like, this is underperforming and everybody knows it, but you forced me to buy it. So then it's very hard for you to stick to it. So this is like, it's an extreme diet program, but it works for me because behaviorally I'm okay for that pain. So first 2 funds which I had was the same thing, that whatever I did in my SIP portfolio, I visited Naren and Parik was my first 2. Then in 2020, by the middle or end of it, I started betting on Prashant Jain. I got that timing was right. And then
the timing was visionary, I have to say, because he was under so much criticism.
The key trigger was there was a very large rating agency which also gave up. So I'm like, now all the guys have given up and the portfolio is still the same. So my odds are insanely high, and there were early signs that some kind of a turn had happened. See, but the key question for me was, is there a way to time it? But there is absolutely no way to time it, because in 18 also there was a small upside which happened. So then you could have said that is probably the right. So I just got lucky on the timing, but the broad idea was that funds which are underperforming with low. Now again, if you put the same framework, you will again get 2-3 funds today. So let's say something from the quality bucket, you will find the same approach. But I've still not picked it up, but we have some frameworks based on which we kind of try to figure out which is the right time to get it. But the broad sense is underperforming funds, good fund manager who have 10-15 year legacy or track record, and they are not churning and they are withstanding the pressure.
Right. But then what do you do when a fund manager leaves, like Prashant Jain did?
Correct. So then you wait it out for some time. Right now I've still not shifted it. But the ideal thing is then you wait for that next pattern to emerge. The moment you figure it out, you kind of shift it. But in an ideal case, at least in the other cases, I did not need to take that decision, which is why I mentally try to see that I don't need to change the fund. So usually when I pick fund managers, these are legendary or these are fund managers who've already seen 10 years. So the odds of them leaving is low. But in Prashant Jain's case, he did leave. So I have to shift it at some point in time. But right now, anyway, the cycle is playing. So I am just leaving it.
You're letting it ride.
I am letting it ride. But at some level, I might, if I get that next, most likely the shift will be towards quality-oriented fund at some point in time. So this is how I broadly, and then I take these small tactical bets where some very large proven company goes through a crazy crash or something. I take those bets, but with the assumption that out of 10, I will get 4 wrong.
How are you with real estate?
See, I have one house which we have bought that is for staying. See, most of these patterns happen from what happens in your real life, right? So both my parents had bought a real estate in 2003, somewhere around 20 lakhs. Probably the best timing that they could get. And by 2008 it was at 2 crores or something. We got it as a price. But the real challenge for us was that I kind of in 2004-5 my father was diagnosed with cancer. So we lost him. So at that point I was in college first year, and we were 3 of us. I was in college first year, brother was in 7th standard, the youngest brother was just 2 years old. So, and my mom was a government employee in railways. So you know how difficult it is, right? But technically, if you think about it, in the next 3-4 years, we had a house which was at 2 crores, and we have a challenging situation. The real problem then, which I kind of realized, is that while it's really hard, and then we had to go through a really
Did he have insurance also?
No, he did have, but that kind of covered the house. But we did not have any life insurance, we did not have anything. So the real challenge was then I realized that most of the requirements in life doesn't come at 1 crore, 2 crore. It's like you need that 1 lakh extra to pay that fees. You need that 50,000 for that. You need that 5 lakhs for that car. But for a 1 lakh, 2 lakh expense, you can't sell a 2 crore asset. And the rent that we got was peanuts. Though it was an old house or whatever, rent came and we were not staying. It was a center of the city, but it was not a great area within that area. So what happened was that this whole thing of you had the money, but it was still not useful for your real life kind of, and they were just not able to sell it because mentally you are like, for a small 2 lakh expense, why would I? And what do I do with it? Because it's their backup net, right? So effectively you had the money, but still you had to go through all these struggles. So from there on, my framework became that liquidity became my number one personal, because if for anything that I have, the next 2 days I need to get the money and as effortless as possible. So which is why I don't do NPS, I don't do the gold sovereign, gold bond funds. Anything that locks in my money, I have a mental baggage that I don't
PPF
want to,
also no.
I don't. For me, if my money is, because I've seen this thing play out, if we could have that, it's not a physical lock-in, it's a mental lock-in that this was one. And then the second bad experience, this is not a bad experience, it's a good experience, but you kind of, the liquidity framework was driven by it. Second was, in our place that we were staying, there used to be redevelopment where they take up old apartments and the builder, so the entire area was going through that phase. We were slightly outside the city, not like the precise inside city. Most of the apartments were getting rebuilt. So we gave ours was the longest property. So we gave it to a builder at 2010. But from then on, and he was one of the top builders.
Sorry, so this wasn't the house that your parents bought. This is
correct, and that's still there. We've still not sold it. My wife currently uses it for her. She runs a baking chain, so she uses that as a factory. So that was the one that we brought purely for an investment. This was the one which was staying. The guy came with a nice offer, said it will be a fancy apartment, showed and every other apartment outside our area was going through this chain, and there were 2-3, and all our friends were getting their apartments done. So it was a very simple deal. The builder takes it, he will construct extra apartment. We were 66 of us. He will probably do it as 120, 130, and we don't need to pay a single penny. He will give you the amount, he will pay you the rent, and in 2 years we get the new house. So it was a no-brainer.
A bigger house, I assume.
Correct. And then you only have some additional 60 people to put up there. But it's a fancy house, right? So, but the whole thing is, he went through a problem in the next 1-2 years, and then he ran off.
Was this in COVID?
It was not in COVID. This was way back in 2010. And you won't, and trust me, till date it's still an empty plot. There were a lot of cases going on, and probably some of them, 10 of them have finally been able to do a deal, and 10 of them have started. So last month it's got, and probably my mom will get the money back after how long ago? It's almost like 14 years, right? So we've had both the experiences of great returns and like getting caught in this. So what we've realized is, if you get caught, it takes a long time to come out of it. It's almost 14 years, right? So mentally, I have seen both of these. So I am very averse to this, and unfortunately, the property that we bought also is taking far more time than what is promised. But at least it'll come. It is almost a 1 year, 2 year delay. That's like almost an event, but that's due to. I mean, there is other emotional angle also to it, because this is my mindset, right? But it's a when you're buying it as a family, and you also have your other half. They have their own mindset on what. So effectively, I have not had a great experience in real estate. So my sense is, for living it's fine, but from an investment perspective, I don't. And I'm also used to this doing it on the phone through MFs, right? Now to go back there is very, very high. So I don't think I am a real estate or a land dealer.
Yeah. How are you for insurance?
Insurance, I have one life insurance, and then I have one health insurance. Life insurance almost for 2.5 crores, and health is 15-20 lakhs.
And this is separate from your employer, right?
Yeah, this is separated from my employer.
Arun, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Neil. Thank you.